Hi there, everybody. Julija Simas here, Agent 12 for the Cosmic Intelligence Agency. I'm doing a bit of an update for the Cancer Ingress, the solstice that is about to happen, the next turning point of this world. The solstice points, as many of us will know, of course, are when the sun reaches its highest point or its lowest point, depending on what hemisphere you're in. And so at this point, it's the summer solstice in the northern hemisphere and cold and wintry down here in Australia. So I'd like to invite you to have a listen today. I haven't had any other agents come and join me for this as we've just finished a retreat and it's been so busy to sort of organize something else. So I've just kind of put something together to show you in regard to looking at the ingress charts as we use as astrologers all the ingress charts, predominantly the Aries ingress, to show us what the year ahead would be like. And we're going to kind of recap on that a little bit. But also then, every quarter, every cardinal ingress. So Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, denoting the kind of theme and flavor of the months to come. And so I'm going to be looking at that through also ACG maps and geodetic maps because this time round, there is just so much that's evident actually as grounded on the planet, like, showing up. And it's not always like that, but I have to say that I've learnt to, when we use ACG maps or geodetic maps, there might be a hotspot like Gaza and, something's not showing up there. So it's like, well, how can we rely on, all these lines if we know that there's a real focus going on somewhere, but we don't see anything there? So I've learnt to use midpoints. And they're midpoints on the Cosmo dial or on the 90-degree dial, as so to speak. So we can, we kind of find more information from that. There's also parans that you can use. So I'm going to be going through all of that. And then something that I've been working on for about a year is the sacred zodiac. So stick with me and you'll find out more about that as we go. So if we have a look at just a recap of the Aries ingress, right, of this year, 2025. I mean, astrologers have been talking about 2025 being, such a huge year because, Saturn ingresses into Aries, Neptune, Uranus into Gemini, and the back and forward of, Saturn and Neptune. There's a lot going on. And again, a lot of focus on the 0 point of the zodiac. So if we look back at the Aries ingress, we can see that we had Mercury and Venus retrograde at the time. And I remember talking about this at the Aries ingress. I'll put some links to anyone that wants to follow up on things that we've talked about before, let's say, is that it's very rare to find Venus and Mercury together at an Aries ingress, okay? And as Venus's star point happened just like within 24 hours after this Aries ingress at 2 degrees of Aries, the Venus star point is edging closer every 4 years to that 0 point. So, it's again a hotspot with the Venus star there over the next 8 years as well, before she moves into Pisces in the early 2030s. A bit later, yeah, somewhere around there. If it was 4 years, 25, 29, yeah, 30, 33, 30, 2033. Sorry. Then we can see that Pluto was the midpoint of the sun and the moon. And if we look at the last 3 months and what we've been experiencing and being on the edge of like a World War III scenario, the Pluto moon sun midpoint is very evident there. The moon out of bounds reminds us that we are in the year of the peak of what we call the lunar standstill, where every 2 weeks the moon is going out of bounds. The last full moon in Sagittarius, the moon was fully out of bounds. And of course, it has to happen at the solstice points for the moon to be extended like fully out of bounds in this lunar standstill that only happens every 18 years. So again, a culmination of all these extreme energies. And so just wanted to sort of recap that. We had Mars post retrograde in Cancer that really sort of shuffled a lot of things around, uncomfortably so, as it's not his sign ruling over all these Aries planets. Jupiter also not comfortable in Gemini, ruling over all the Pisces planets. And, they're kind of, this Aries ingress is still overseeing the whole year until we sort of get into early 2026, where the next Aries ingress starts overlapping. And then looking back at the ACG map for the Aries ingress 2025, look at this, now having, seen what's going on in Tehran, we've got Mars moving right through the middle of Tehran. We've got all that Aries retrograde energy and Pisces all culminating over the top of this region. Um, and then we have Jupiter, for instance, going through London, and not really quite through Rome, but let's say through the Greenwich area. And we did have a pope die and a new pope re-elected in the last few months. And then we might look at something like, the Gaza area and Israel and go, okay, well, there's nothing really showing up there. Um, or over Washington, D.C. And, we can see that the moon is close by, on the midheaven. So, a lot of attention going on there. And the moon sun midpoint was going through there as well with Pluto. So, kind of culminating in those areas. But again, nothing directly over the capitals here. So therefore, what we want to, let's say, add in that sense is to look at some midpoints. And here we see that, closer to the Gaza area and Israel, we have Saturn and Ceres midpoint. And then, kind of looking back at Saturn and Ceres here, we know that there was a conjunction of Saturn and Ceres not long after that. And they're both in Pisces, and again culminating over this area here. And then we have Saturn itself. Again, just to, let's say, it would show up near the midheaven if we did a chart for Israel, for this ingress. But we have Saturn going through Moscow and through the eastern part of Ukraine, which is crossing Mars. So I mean, we see these things and we kind of wonder what we can do about them. But the more that you look at them and the more that I have been looking at them over the years, it's almost like, and, having said we need town criers on every corner. Again, you don't want to alert the world with, dramas and all that kind of stuff. But it's almost like it makes astrologers think, well, what can we do about this? In hindsight, we see a lot. We know that. But symbolically, when we read these things, we know that these are hotspots. And so, anyway, so I'm just wanting to kind of show you more of that. So now this is the geodetic map. Now, ACG maps are, of course, the exact time that we find that it is happening all around the planet and it's stamped onto the world. But the geodetic map is a map that begins at 0 Aries right through Greenwich, okay? And it has moved over the centuries, and millennia, even from being, the center being either Egypt or the pyramids, or the 0 point beginning at the pyramids, and then going up through well, Israel, and up through to Moscow, the edge of Ukraine. And again, it still remains a huge hotspot these days. But anyway, these days we do use the 0 Aries point that begins at Greenwich and goes 30 degrees across the planet. So it's like whatever chart you want to slot into this grid, it will show up. So all of Aries, all Aries planets will be above this part of Europe. All Taurus planets, for instance, will be over Israel and Moscow and over to Iran, which then Gemini begins. Anyway, I'm not here to teach you how to read a geodetic map. If for those wanting to know more, I will put some links into a class that you can do, and I will be doing another one later in the year for the CIA. But you get to know, you have to get to know where the spots are, and that every place on the planet has a coordinate. An MC coordinate and an ascendant coordinate, as in degrees. So Melbourne, where I am, has a 24-degree Leo MC and a 18-degree Sagittarius rising. So, when I think of planets in those areas, or in Gemini, the opposite signs, or in Aquarius, the opposite sign of Leo, then they will be kind of on the IC, and as opposed to ascending, the Gemini planets will be descending. So there's alarm bells going, oh, Jupiter's in this area, at the moment, or, something like that. So again, you get to know what you're looking at, right? So again, geodetic map for the Aries ingress, we have the moon right near Los Angeles. So the moon, if we remember, was in Sagittarius. It was out of bounds, and what have we seen happen? Of course, deportations and protests in regard to deportations, and the ICE movement, not movement, organization, government organization, I should say. Again, through the geodetic map, we've got all these Pisces and Aries planets going through Central America. There's been rockets falling in there. Some kind of space mission again returned from there. A lot of things. And, through the USA, we continue to see Chiron and Eris right through Washington, D.C., as they are at 25 degrees of Aries. Washington, D.C.'s ascendant is 23 Aries. So there you go. They're right there. The what do you call it? The country is in chaos. There's a lot of discord going on. And we know the USA is going through a Chiron return. It's about to have a Jupiter return as well. So there's a lot going on. But on the geodetic map, we're seeing these two there. And it's interesting to note that when Donald Trump was elected back in 2016, Eris was still there, a little bit ahead. Chiron wasn't there, but Uranus was there. So Uranus and Eris were conjunct over Washington, D.C. When Donald Trump first got elected. So these are really super interesting. And then, of course, what we've had is the death of a pope, and we've had Neptune cross that Greenwich point. I've said this a few times, but when Jupiter crossed the 0 point of Aries, and on this map, back in 2022, Queen Elizabeth died. And so she was, of course, the royal Jupiter. Now we've got Neptune, a spiritual leader, died. And again, a new one was elected. And as Saturn has now come through this point, just in the last, 2 weeks, what have we seen happen? It's been intense. And I think I predicted on someone's channel that let's just wait and see when Saturn gets to this point. It's a point that affects the whole world. And that's why we call the 0 cardinal points world points, right? And then look at this, Uranus right over Tehran. Again, looking, back at our Aries ingress. And anyway, there's always more, but let's keep going. So let's, focusing on now the Cancer solstice that we are about to have on the 21st of June. Some dates will be the 20th of June, so Friday in Australia, and other places, is we have the Sun, Jupiter, down here in the sign of Cancer, of course, and squaring off to Neptune and Saturn. So, again, Saturn being at the 0 point, Neptune sort of embracing it, let's say, and Jupiter and the Sun square. We can see that it's a few difficult months ahead, and perhaps longer, because Saturn and Neptune keep, crossing over that 0 point over this time. The moon, where's the moon? The moon is square Pluto. Yes, of course. So again, giving more tension to, I suppose, whenever we see the moon in Taurus, it's to do with money and expenses and, you know, high prices and, that kind of thing. Then we have Mars having just moved into Virgo, would perhaps give us the hope that some things will get fixed, sorted somehow as well. But we have a difficult aspect to Saturn going on and Neptune as well. So those two energies working together, yes, there's a lot that we want to see fixed in the world. It's almost saying, well, it's going to take some time as well because these energies don't sort of see each other well, as we know with what's called an inconjunct 150 degrees. Uranus about to move to Gemini, which again changes the story big time for the world and what's going on. Again, it's his first ingress and then will return next year. But it is this very, it's on the Sun Moon midpoint, which is zero Gemini, and it's almost kind of calling us to kind of have a closer look at that 0 point in Gemini and what will that mean? Venus and I'll talk about world points a bit more in a sec, but Venus is at a world point at 15 degrees of fix. So if the world points are zero cardinal, we make another crossing point to make the eighth harmonic, and we've got the 15 degrees of of fixed, which is 15 Taurus, 15 Leo, 15 Scorpio, and 15 Aquarius. So Venus is right there. Again, she's ruling over the moon as well, and she's in a what we call, she's 45 degrees from the sun, so she's very much in the eighth harmonic aspect. She is at her most elongated, again being 45 degrees from the sun. She's a little bit under that now, but 45 is, pretty dynamic, and then again 45 to Saturn there. So when we think about Venus and what she means, she's always very present, and it's all about, I'm not going to say the point of living, but life and love and all the things that go with how we want to have a pleasant and wonderful lifestyle. But then it's not so easy for many at the moment. Or never is really, is it? And then, yes, so keeping those things in mind, it's quite telling, look at the next 3 months. But again, I think the solstice points, in a way, I have this sense that they are more significant than the actual Aries point. And I'll show you that in a bit later. So now here is the ACG map for this Aries ingress, and it's already, like, I was looking at it a few weeks ago, and it's already like so kind of alive with what's going on and what's going down. And we see these ingress charts, take on the story before they're actually exact. Okay, and as we can see here, we've got Saturn and Neptune crossed over by Mercury right over Tehran and Iran. Mercury is at a world point. Remember, I didn't actually say that. Mercury being at a world point as well. 22 is another slice that we do after the eighth harmonic. We slice again, and that will become clearer again. So we'll see in a minute. Then we have the Sun, Jupiter, and what's Jupiter involved with there? The Sun and Jupiter crossing right through Israel and Gaza. And of course, in Cancer, we're thinking homelands, protection of homelands, all of that kind of thing, the suffering of many people that continues. We see Mars going right through the middle here, up through the Baltic states and through Europe in a sense here. And I did hear the other day that, one of Russia's provisos to end the war in the Ukraine is to hand over the Baltic states or get them out of NATO, and that's not going to happen. So these tensions are building so much everywhere. Then we have a look at at, let's say, Los Angeles, a hotspot, and just to the left of that, we have Ceres. Now, Ceres represents much to do with the people and what they protest about. And there's many sort of, let's say, levels of Ceres, but she does, is a goddess that represents the people, as does the moon, but let's say in a more bolder way, in a more negotiative way, something like that. So, anyway, very interesting to see. And then for Washington, D.C., we have Pluto rising. Pluto rising with Uranus on the IC. I know it's hard to see on these little maps, but oh, they're little when they're on the computer like this, but you can always kind of stop and have a closer look, or get your own software is the best way to learn about these. So anyway, there's a lot more going on everywhere, but I haven't got time to bring it all in. And so if I do a chart for, let's say, Washington DC, there's a really cool aspect to Astro Gold at the moment. You can kind of, this isn't live on my Astro Gold at the moment, but you can point to any sort of city or place that you want, and the chart will pop up with a kind of roving mouse. So that's really cool. Anyway, so this is the chart for Washington, D.C. We can see Pluto rising. I mean, when we see the Sun and Jupiter in the fifth house, it has so much to do with the president, and we know what kind of president he is. So the fifth house, let's see what happens further there. The scrutiny and the judgment, I think, with Mars in Virgo coming from the outside, the seventh house. I'm just picking up a few things. Then we have the chart for Jerusalem right over in Israel, and we can see the Jupiter and Sun rising. So this is how you put the maps together with the charts. So you kind of, you know what you're looking for. So then when you're looking at a map and deciding where to travel or whatever it is, you can go, oh, well, over here, Uranus is crossing the node. So is that something that I'm interested in, or whatever? And then over here, over Tehran, we can see Mercury rising with the Saturn and Neptune right on the midheaven here. Okay, so yes, pretty hairy there. And then for the geodetic map, again for this Cancer Ingress, we can see a lot going on as well. So through Tehran, we have Mars and also Uranus. Now the geodetic map, the fixed map, so they've been there for a while. Mars has been moving over through that area since it's been in Leo, all through this area. So again, heating stuff up. And this is the great thing about geodetic, or watching geodetic planets on the map, because it's almost like, we can see them moving slowly, and it's not like the world is spinning. We're just seeing them moving and covering ground. And again, seeing where things will, come to fruition, perhaps. Over Jerusalem again, I had to use some midpoints to go, well, nothing's going through there, although I think, well, Ceres has moved. There's, been a few things moved through there. I do remember Jupiter was very much through there when the war began, or began again, back a few years ago. And here we have the Saturn Neptune right over, of course, Greenwich, crossed by Pluto not far, as well. Pluto's moved off. That Pluto was actually there right on that, end of Cancer Capricorn, because this is Cancer rising area, Aries on the midheaven. And that's when the Queen died, and Jupiter was there. But now Pluto's moved off, and you can see it's kind of on the descendant through Europe here. What I was talking about before with Eris and Chiron over Washington, D.C. Again, a little bit moving off a bit, and all these planets kind of moving through that way. The hotspot through the center there as well, with all the conglomeration of Pisces planets and Aries planets. And then we have the Black Moon Lilith right through Los Angeles at the moment, or for the solstice, okay? So it's pretty interesting to keep an eye on these. And then as you're doing geodetic maps, again, as I said, every place on the planet has a coordinate. And you get to know what they are. Like, for instance, Beijing, China is 23 degrees of Libra ascending, which is exactly the opposite to 23 of Aries ascending in Washington, D.C. Um, then we can look at some leaders and see what planets they have, sorry, what coordinates kind of hit their planets, let's say. Vladimir Putin is a 13 degrees Libra sun. Now, the MC of Washington, D.C. is 13 degrees of Capricorn, so it squares. Um, 23 Leo MC, which is Vladimir Putin, it's the same as Moscow, right? And Moscow has an ascendant of 7 Taurus, 17 degrees Cancer and Uranus. So again, whatever kind of country you're looking at, you want to see what the coordinates of the capital are, and then how a leader is responding to or connecting to that point. Vladimir Zelensky has his moon at 17 Leo, which is exactly the same ascendant geodetically as Kiev. I think that's also something about knowing how to pick your leaders, perhaps. 6 degrees Aquarius is his sun, and that squares the Moscow MC. Okay. So, you can see these things connecting in just this kind of really pure and simple kind of, sacred geometry in a sense. Netanyahu, he has a cardinal nodal axis and Neptune at 15 and 16 degrees, again, close to the USA MCIC coordinates. Donald Trump has Jupiter at 12 Libra, so again, very much embedded into the MC and IC of the US of Washington, D.C. And yeah, these are the Washington, D.C., MC, IC 13, Capricorn and Cancer. Capricorn up, Cancer below. And we'll see in a minute, but every point, every degree in the zodiac, if you use the midpoint dial or the 90-degree dial, will also have an opposite degree. That's getting a little bit more, up there, but once you know it, you know it. Okay. And kind of more things fit together. I mean, it's almost like in astrology, we don't need more to fit things, but there is more. There's always more. And in the case of using maps, again, I've been seeing these empty spots not making sense. Now, by using midpoints and the Cosmo dial, it's making more sense to me. All right. It's like we've got a map and we're folding it and we're folding it and we're folding it, and things are on top of each other that relate this way. So anyway, it makes a lot of sense to me. So, and the ascendant descendant of Washington, yeah, 23 Aries and Libra, which is opposite 8 degrees of mutable. So 8 degrees of mutable is also where the USA Ceres is at 9 Pisces. So we're working with 1 degree kind of orbs here, not any further with midpoints. But anyway, and if we remember, the Aries ingress had a Ceres return to 9 Cancer. So again, a lot of kind of uprisings, protests, about everyone who's not doing too well with what's going on or the new regime. And so let me just explain the world point. So again, we're using what we call the cosmobiology dial. So it's only 90 degrees that is represented. But so the 90 degrees is split up into 30 degrees of cardinal, fixed, and mutable. And I'm sure we all know that. So there's 4 cardinal signs, 4 fixed signs, and 4 mutable. So you'll see any planets show up that are either in any of the cardinal signs in this area, right? You'll see any planets that are in the fixed signs in this area in the next 30 degrees. So every black and white section is 5 degrees. And then we have the mutable signs. And let's just say here we've got Uranus at the moment, right, like right at the end of fixed Taurus, and it's going to move to 0 Gemini. And if we wanted to know the point that was exactly opposite that, it would be 15 degrees of cardinal. Okay, so right through the middle, which is its opposite point. So it's almost like an opposition. We call it, opposite the dial. Okay. So, um, and all kind of ebbing together in what we call the eighth harmonic, and the eighth harmonic, being the oppositions, the squares, the semi-squares, the eighths, the sixteenths, the 32ths, and so on. And you can get as small and small until everything connects. And really, in astrology, everything connects. But let's just put a few of these kind of layers on, and you can see what's happening. So what we call a world point is, of course, anything at zero cardinal, okay, as I've mentioned. Then we have anything at 15 fixed, which I've also mentioned. And then as we halve the 15 fixed, we get to 22 cardinal again, which is opposite 7 mutable. So again, we're folding the square. And this is a great exercise to do, is to get a circle and put the 90-degree points in there, and then fold it and fold it and fold it 4 times. And it's really, it's fantastic to see it working. So yeah, 22 degrees of cardinal. Well, so zero cardinal is opposite anything 15 fixed. Okay, they're 45 degrees apart because this is a 90-degree dial. Then 22 degrees of cardinal, which is the halfway point, I'm cutting this circle in half again, is opposite 7 degrees of mutable. Again, we can halve it again, and many don't sort of go this far, but you could halve it again to 11 cardinal, which is halving this again, and opposite that is 26 degrees fixed. And if we remember the Aries ingress, well, they were close, but sorry, Uranus has been traveling through here, of course, at 26 fixed, which is Algol, and, again, many disruptions. And then we've got another point fixed, 5 degrees of fixed, which on the geodetic map, as I said, is the line that goes up through Giza, Israel, Eastern Ukraine, Syria, and up to Moscow. And that's 5 degrees fixed, opposite 18 degrees of mutable. So again, when you're seeing these kind of degrees kind of come up, as in planets transiting those spots, these are, the things that kind of automatically start thinking about, right? And if we recall 2020, what happened at 22 degrees of cardinal, exactly on that point, was the Saturn, Pluto, Sun, Ceres, Mercury conjunction square Eris. That's kind of ushered in COVID and, lockdowns and this kind of world that we've not really, it still keep, what do you call it? It still is talked about a lot, as it's almost like we lost a few years after that, right? So you can see them starting to really work. At the moment, Mercury is here at 22 cardinal for this ingress. So with Mercury, we might think, there is a hope for some better negotiations about what's going on, as Mercury is, what do you call it? The communicator and the one that sort of goes between to do the right sort of trade, but it's in Cancer. So, again, everyone's sort of thinking for their own good as opposed to a collective good, perhaps, maybe. And then world points and world leaders is really interesting because, again, Zelensky has Uranus at 15 fixed, and he has his sun Venus at 5 fixed, which is, again, very much connected to Moscow. I mean, you can't make this up. USA nodes are at 6 degrees fixed. Donald Trump has Saturn at 23 cardinal and Uranus at 18 mutable. And again, they're all points that I was talked about back here, right? Oops. Putin, Mercury at 21 cardinal. And again, we're not expecting that when we look at an ingress chart or a cardinal ingress that things are going to happen, like on this weekend. Of course, they're around this time and over the next few months as well. And then Netanyahu is 23, again, midpoint, 23 cardinal, and his ascendant 7 mutable. Elon Musk has his nodes at 15 fixed. So did Julian Assange. They're born just a few days apart. His Venus at 18 mutable, which Jupiter just passed in the last few months, and his Sun at 5 Cardinal. So, again, prominent figures having all of these, things happening to them, not surprisingly. Uh, and look, I just want to show you another example because, there was this horrible, horrific plane crash the other day, leaving Ahmedabad in India. And of course, I had to look up the astrology for that. And this is the ACG map, and we can see Mercury right above. Again, Mercury is about travel, and Cancer's not so much about flight, but it is on the midheaven. The moon's opposite. Jupiter is about flight and longer journeys, and it's opposite the moon. The moon's very grounded in Capricorn. The moon's also out of bounds. So we've got this kind of, and Mercury's out of bounds, having said that. They're both, pulling at the extremes. Jupiter's there. Neptune's on the what do you call it, descendant, and this plane crash happens. But if we look a little bit closer, well, here's the moon showing it's out of bounds and very close to its most extreme. It was just after the full moon. And Mercury's out of bounds as well, and they're again very much opposite each other. But we can also see that the sun has reached, it's very close to the solstice. So the sun is only a few degrees or declination degrees away from being at its extreme north. And Jupiter the same. Jupiter's kind of right on the edge of not going any further north. He's not going out of bounds. He's going to start coming back in. So we've got a few planets showing extremes in different ways, right? Not just being in a sign. And you can see them here in the latitude. Astro Gold's great in that sense because it shows us the declination that all the planets are in. Mercury up here, Jupiter, all up above. And you can see that on the maps otherwise as well, which is cool. And then also, oh, now I can't see what this, oh yeah, the parans, again, this is another kind of level of ACG maps. I haven't used parans on Geodetic Maps, but anyway, that's kind of another issue. But if you use parans, it's a bit more tricky because you have to look at a lot of them to find which ones are where. And so, but we can see the Saturn and Neptune Paran going right through Ahmedabad as well at the time. So, incredible combinations, let's say, of what we find. And then on the geodetic map, this is for the plane crash as well. We can see, Ahmedabad's around here, but, again, nothing's showing up. So you sort of think, well, okay, I always look at both maps. I'm not relying on just one anymore, put it that way. Again, because I've seen holes. Yes, so the geodetic map showing nothing, but if we examine further, 15 Gemini is Ahmedabad's geodetic MC, and we can see this degree is triggered by Mars, Uranus, Saturn and Neptune. So yeah, so again, there's a lot of things that we miss if we're not putting all the levels together. That's just that's how I see it. So on to something a little bit more inspiring, perhaps, although all of that astrology is inspiring and what we can, let's say, do with it as a collective of agents and, how we kind of stream it through the world. Again, perhaps working more closely together. There's so many on particular projects like, like geo maps and that kind of thing. Anyway, but what I'd like you, because it's a solstice, when I was in Lithuania a few years ago, I went to a museum and it's one of the motifs that you see everywhere. And of course, we can recognize it as a flower of life. But what it related to, and this was again on a museum about aligning ourselves with solstice, suns and sunsets, sunrises and sunsets. So as it's a Northern Hemisphere country, and very pagan in that sense, so very much honoring the sun all the time. And I have got a Lithuanian background, so therefore my interest more so. But this is the sunrise point for the summer solstice in the Northern Hemisphere and the sunset point. And then for the winter solstice sunrise and the winter solstice sunset. And as you can see, so they've aligned it with north and south, but the flower doesn't align with east and west. It's aligning with the solstice, sunrise, and sunset points, which I just went, okay, that's really interesting because we would probably align our zodiac with east and west. But as we'll see, and more that, as I kind of went through Europe and did more research, they're not aligning with east and west or the beginning of the zodiac. They're aligning with the solstice points. And the solstice points being, the world axis or the world tree, the most significant kind of, axis because it's where the sun goes, right? It's where the sun is at extremes and lowest, the highest points and the lowest points. And so, this other diagram on the left might sort of show it a bit clearer as well. So from the northern hemisphere, we're looking south towards the ecliptic. And actually, I'll just take it back a bit, and we're seeing the winter sun and then the summer sun. But what I found out was the most important thing, and this was by going to Prague and experiencing the Prague Zodiac on the ground that's embedded in the city, was that the most significant thing and their alignment of their zodiac began with the winter solstice sunrise spot and the summer solstice sunset. So that's where we get the diagonal. So we're looking at this diagonal in a sense, okay? That the summer sun high in the sky at sunset is the point, and that's where a lot of, let's say, pagans used to go and worship the sun, the sunsets and all that at the highest point during the summer solstice. Although the sun doesn't really set, it stays up a lot in the northern skies there. But and then the other really significant point was when the sun would return from its lowest point at sunrise. So we got sunrise, sunset, okay, but the opposite extremes of the solstices. So I found that, like, yeah, so I don't know, it just makes you kind of go warm and fuzzy inside. So that's an important thing to remember, okay? So summer solstice sunrise, summer solstice sunset, but we are using this winter solstice sunrise, summer solstice sunset, which is 0 Cancer and 0 Capricorn. Okay, and this is how I've kind of configured to align the sacred zodiac, but to do with what I learnt in Prague. But we can see it in other places around the world, like for instance, Newgrange. The opening where it's the winter solstice sunrise point, the lowest point in this of the sun's journey to the south, winter, that lights up the inside of this chamber. That is the significant point here, okay? It's not the summer solstice sunrise point, it's the winter one. So reigniting, the northern hemisphere, and so to speak. And then so if we align the rest of it to the summer solstice sunset point, would be up here, okay? So we can do that, of course, in our own places, in our own spaces. Again, I know a lot of astrologers that align their spaces with the Aries point being, the eastern point. But I'm giving you something today that you can do it, let's say, in a more ancient or sacred way, again, aligned with the honoring of the height of the sun, not so much the beginning of the zodiac, the height and the low of the sun. At these times of the year. So in Newgrange, we can see that the summer sunset, the solstice winter sunrise, happens 45 degrees south of east. Now, it depends on your latitude to know how far south or north of east that's winter solstice or summer solstice sunset or sunrise is going to happen. And I urge you to use stellarium for that, because you put in your place. For instance, if you were in latitude of Greenland, you'll be 64 degrees north, and this winter solstice sunrise point will be at 66 degrees south of southeast. For me in Melbourne, Australia, at 37 degrees south, We have a most perfect alignment with the zodiac because our sunrise and sunset points for the solstice are 30 degrees away. So I'll show you that in a minute. If you are at the equator, of course, your sunset and sunrise point is going to be 23 degrees away because you're at the equator. 23 degrees, yes, solstice points because that's how far and low the sun goes. And then you adjust it. So for me, if it's 30 degrees in Melbourne, so if you're in latitudes between 30 degrees and zero, it's going to be somewhere in between. And it's really only a couple of degrees, seven or 5 degrees. So, you know, the maps that I'm going to show you and how to do, you just need to adjust them a little bit. Um, and so I've written about the Prague Zodiac in Timelords magazine. Anyone wants to know more about it. I'm not going to explain it more, but pretty much there's a zodiac again embedded into the city, but aligned with the solstice sunset point up here where the cathedral is. And the spires are known to, as the sun sets, the spires all the way down to the river and across the river and into the midpoint, which is this amazing little church rotunda, which is the center point, crosses over and then, of course, joins with the winter solstice sunrise point. Okay, so we're looking from the northern hemisphere. If you haven't been to Prague, I urge you to go there and find out more about the Prague Zodiac. And yes, I won't go into it more, but yes, the cathedral, the old pagan worship site for the summer solstice sunset was up here. Of course, that's where the cathedral was built. And Cancer in Prague is actually a green lobster, not a crab, but a green lobster. So that's in this area here. I've talked to there's a famous bridge called the Charles Bridge, which has got two towers on it, and this is in the Gemini sector. The famous clock is right near the zero Aries point, that ticks over time. It's incredibly fascinating to find all of this out. And it's been built into the city over millennia, okay? And it's almost like what they call it, the the native spirit that has kind of resonated and kept going through there without many people ever talking about it. And the revolution happened in the Aquarius Capricorn, started in the Capricorn zone and went down this avenue in the Aquarius zone. So that was the Velvet Revolution in the 80s. Einstein was known to study in the Sagittarian zone. Kepler, he was, I think, in the Aries zone or lived in the air. No, he was in the Taurus zone, interestingly. A huge stadium that was the biggest in Europe, as I understand it, was neglected by the Soviet regime. But when Czechoslovakia got its independent freedom from the Soviets, there was a huge concert there that Rolling Stones put on for free, and it was a massive, party. And it happened while Jupiter was going through this area, and most of the Rolling Stones are, what do you call it? Leos, or there's a lot of Leo energy. Anyway, so I started exploring these things further, with a chart of Melbourne and then putting it on my house, like you would local space maps. But these are almost like, it's almost like a grid, like a geodetic grid that kind of aligns your area with the solstice points, okay, to begin your zodiac. So yeah, this is of course a northern hemisphere chart, and we're looking south to the ecliptic, right? So that if I was to turn this point up to the ecliptic, I've got my zodiac turning the right way, okay? Because being from the southern hemisphere, I was trying to work that out, going, how come, Aries and Taurus are up there? It's because if I press that down to the south and, if I'm looking from the northern hemisphere, um, remember our Google Maps and stuff aren't set like our zodiacs, or like our minds and our what do you call it? Astrology charts. So you have to kind of sit with it to understand it. But if you're in the north looking south, you're looking at the ecliptic, and all of this is rising up from the east. Okay, pretty simply. All right. So that's what I wanted to do with, more maps, and, creating one that was just a template for any of us to use. Okay. And, many of us have heard of the Hellenistic sort of idea of the ascent and descent of souls, which stems from the Thema Mundi, which was, that the moon and the sun were in Cancer, and that started the whole world, or, started everything moving. And of course, Cancer being the highest point of the sun, and the place where souls descend into matter or come down to the earth, and again through the very fertile summer solstice time, in a sense. And then the light rebirth, represented by Capricorn and Saturn. On the other side, this winter solstice sunrise, where we, let's say, the light ascends again, the light comes back. So anyway, just a few things to kind of, know how old these ideas are. And of course, we are still very much in this rhythm, in this solstice kind of experience, that's never going to leave us. And to sort of return to that somewhat more, or understand it more, will kind of give us all more of a connection, let's say. So yeah, just a reminder that this, you can read more about, you can put your own zodiac chart in onto the map of Prague, and then start going to find what amazing things you will find, that where your ascendant line is, or where your Venus lines are. This is, for instance, where my Venus line went through, and this beautiful elliptical dome church, that's like a one of a kind, and I love copper roofs. So anyway, a very Venusian. And then yeah, I've done it on Melbourne again. It's so interesting to explore. In order to put this sacred zodiac onto your center, you need a center point, right? So if you're looking at a city, you need to, use the GPO. If you want to do it for your house, you find the center point of your house or your room. Start with your room and get to know it. Put it on your house, put it on your city. Again, it's just so fascinating. So you just need to align yourself a bit like local space lines, but much more. It's much more about the zodiac, not the planets, and we would see the planets moving through there, not so much the yeah, like local space lines has planets dropping down on the azimuth. Anyway, so all you have to do is align your kind of, we know Google Maps are aligned with north, south, east, and west. So, north is up from here anyway. Well, from everywhere, sorry. So put, the north, south, east, west lines on, then the halfway points. So you got a closer kind of alignment, which is, northeast and southeast and west, south and north, south. I mean, southwest and northwest. You know what I mean? Align that, and then, hang on, why is that doing it twice? And then what you want to do is put your 30 degrees from 30 degrees north of east for me in Melbourne, to put the winter solstice sunrise point in. Okay. Sorry, the summer solstice sunrise. I know what I'm talking about. Sorry, this is the winter solstice. I'm in the southern hemisphere. So it's this is where my sun is now, in a sense, 30 degrees north of east. Okay, it's furthest away from me. And when it's summer solstice, the sun is down as far as it goes down to the south, and it's my summer solstice. So it's the winter solstice sunrise point and the summer solstice sunset point. That should say sunset. Excuse me. That should say sunset. I hope you sunset. Okay. And you put that line through there, and that's where, oops, and that's how you want to add your zodiac. And see, I've put 0 degrees of Cancer right there, opposite 0 degrees of Capricorn, and that is my zodiac on Melbourne. Anyway, we did this at the retreat and it was so much fun, and I hope people have gone home to do it. But again, it's a very universal template that can be used anywhere. Again, we only need to know our directions, and we only need to know how far north or south is our solstice summer sunrise, and so winter solstice sunrise point and summer solstice sunset point are from east and west. Okay, and that can be done on stellarium, and that might be a bit more difficult for some of you, but really using like a 23, this 30-degree thing for all these mid latitudes would be fine. If it's a few degrees out, I wouldn't worry about it too much, okay, unless you're very much extreme or very close to the equator, then you'd shift this up by a few degrees, okay, like 23. You'd shift this by 3, like you want the 0 point to be the thing that shifts though, okay? It's important that the 0 point of cardinals shifts those degrees, okay? So it'll be a little bit, so if you're closer to the equator, you're going to shift that point a little bit closer to west and east. And if you're further away, it's going to be move further away like I showed you for Newgrange, okay? Um, and then I have made a grid that can be used for both north and south. Again, and working it out to you can print it out and you can use it as a template if you're in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere. I've done it for both, so it's almost like clipping them to join them in the center. And really, we have a sacred world alignment in the sense to do with Capricorn and Cancer. So I urge you to do that, to print this out. I will leave a link to get a PDF for this, and you can print it out. The bigger the better, and then they should just overlap together and be exactly the same. And in order to get this wonderful little map of mine, which you can use for your home, your house, um, look at your city and what's happening in there. It's really quite amazing. And what I've done with this work is that people are already kind of having things very much connected to, like my solstice point is really this solstice sunrise point for me is the corner of my kitchen. So a lot of gatherings, it's in between Gemini and Cancer, a lot of gatherings where we gather to talk and have dinner and then relax is in this area. Our entertaining area is right out here in the Leo sector. Libra is where we kind of have, more of the exotic things in the lounge room and collected art pieces. My study is in Sagittarius. My husband's study is in, or our front door is Capricorn. My husband's study is in, or room is in Aquarius, and he's a, graphic artist, and, a musician. So, anyway, and my bedroom is in the Pisces zone. So, and anyway, it continues. So, have a look what already is in your place, and you can kind of readjust things to align with this sacred zodiac, being if you're north or northern southern hemisphere or southern hemisphere. So I hope you liked that bit of info, and it's probably a bit longer than I thought it would be, but that's okay. It's the solstice. I'm happy to share it with you. It's one of my favorite subjects, and again, more to come in that sense from me. So anyway, check out Timelords magazine. I think our submissions are quite full already for the next issue, but the advertising, there's always room for more to help us kind of keep up the issue that is now a fully online magazine with incredible archives. So don't be shy, get in touch. This time of the year, of course, we always like to offer a 20% off for our incredible CIA membership, which has now got, there's so many wonderful archives there and learning for those of you that want to learn more astrology. Like you already know, you've done a few years, but now you really kind of want to dive deeper. We have got so many great teachers and information and so on. And yeah, a whole year of accessing everything that we have coming up. And what we have coming up is, we've had those two things. Sorry, I've just posted a video on working with the Mercury synodic cycle. It is a recording. Most of the things that we do are live. Next up, we've got Leanne McCafferty, who's just written a book on asteroid Juno, which will be very, very interesting and very timely for Cancer as well, as she was kind of the queen to Zeus in a sense, but he's equal. And one of the beautiful things I remember hearing when I was in Greece was, looking around all the temples and the temples of Zeus. There's always a temple of Zeus, but wherever there was a temple of Zeus, there was a temple of Hera, which is the same, goddess equivalent. Um, and our tour guide said that, and this is because the reasons to go to war, and Jupiter was, or Zeus was a warrior god in one of his guises and so on, was the reason to go to war was to come back to the family and to the wife. So I always just thought that was so beautiful. And what do you call it? Then we have Rick Levine booked in, but again, it's very hard to catch. So if you're listening, Agent Rick Levine, we are going to take you up on, we're not sure what he's going to present for us yet. And then Faye Blake is going to join us for a look at your horoscopes in regard to promoting yourself and your business. And I'm sure many of us will need that. And then doing with Frank Clifford the consultation chart, not the cart, the chart, which many of us use in the sense of, and this, it's a perfect sort of system to use if you don't have a time for someone. And it's like using astrology like an oracle, which is kind of one of my favorite things. And trusting the astrology of the moment in that sense in so many ways, somewhat like a horary, but with different sort of different markers, let's say. So yeah, lots of great stuff coming up, and that's all part of the membership. And so I urge you to get online at the CIA and join us for 20% off because there's some great stuff there. So I hope you enjoyed this and stay safe out there and stay good to each other. And I'll see you next time. Signing off, Agent 12. Happy solstice.